Welcome to Bible Smack. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be on the second part of a series dealing with, things called Finding the Way, New Testament Religion. Now, in the first part, what we did was we talked about, how do we understand religion? Well, we understand it from the Bible as opposed to other groups that would let's say they start with some sort of philosophy, or perhaps they start with traditions and creeds and stuff like that. But basically, I did a series before this called Thinking About Jesus, and we went through all the kind of issues of philosophical and apologetic issues, and do you believe, and all that kind of stuff. And we've already kind of gone over that, so we're assuming that there's a foundation built. Okay, and so as believers, how do we understand our religion, what they used to call the way, okay? So, the next topic is, how do we understand the Bible, okay? Well, we've already talked about, we believe it's inspired, we've already talked about, we take it literally, all that kind of stuff, but what does it say, okay? We're going to talk about a topic called Redemptive History. Now, redemptive history is kind of like a big picture term for the gospel. We kind of think of the gospel and we just think of Jesus Christ's life, death, and burial, and resurrection. But redemptive history covers the greatest story ever told. It covers all of the scriptures. So what is the basic theme of the scriptures? Now, historically speaking, a lot of people would look at the Bible and they think, well, there's an Old Testament and then there's a New Testament. We have the Jewish people, and they carry the traditions of the Tanakh, the Old Testament. And so a lot of Christians assumed, okay, well, there was the Old Testament, now there's the New Testament. So they would have what was called a replacement theology, that basically they replaced the Jewish people, the people of God. So essentially, when they replaced the people of God, then all the promises of the Old Testament are fulfilled in that, and everything together is just in that tradition of Christianity. But after studying the Bible many years, didn't feel kind of comfortable with that. Then there was also this kind of belief that, during the time of the Reformation, they started to kind of raise the Bible up and have it as a higher authority. And so what they did was they made a connection. Not only is there like a division point between the old and new, but there was also a continuum. So it's kind of like a crossing of it, okay? And that is that we are the people of God. So you have the people of God kind of running through, and there's a blending of the Old and New Testament. But yet there's got to be a little bit of a distinction too, because we're not under the same system. So that was called like covenant theology, and a lot of the reformers and John Calvin would kind of hold to that. Other people would kind of see less of a distinction between the old and new, and so they would continue the whole thing all the way through. And I would just basically classify these as the Judaizers. Some groups today still would kind of think this way, like Seventh-day Adventists, the Messianic Jews, and basically they would kind of hold that they are God's Jewish chosen people all the way through, Old and New Testament. And so they would be under the law system and kind of have, more of a Jewish theology. Okay? Well, what I've kind of come to understand is a system that, is more made popular in the 1800s, but the very early church, in one of the earliest writings called the Epistle of Barnabas, and also I think I've seen it also quoted of one of the early church preachers named Papias also. They understood that Earth's history was divided into 6,000 years. Now this is 2,000 years ago, okay? But they would be divided in 6,000 years, and therefore it would be 6 periods of time followed by another one, which would be the Sabbath. Now where are they getting that? Well, here in the book of Hebrews, it kind of mentions this in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. And it kind of goes on, and we're talking about entering into the rest and how the Jews did not enter into the rest. And the rest is another term symbolically called the Sabbath, okay? And Hebrews chapter 4 is all about the Sabbath. Well, if we are waiting to enter the rest or the Sabbath is what? It's the seventh day. So we're in the seventh dispensation. The word dispensation is something that the Apostle Paul used, talking about how he had been given the dispensation of grace. And a way of kind of understanding that is that, let's say I'm an American, and I'm talking about President George W. Bush and his Bush administration. But now the Bush administration is over with, and Barack Obama is the president under his administration. Well, that would be, the administration would also be a dispensation, okay? The time when he had these rules and the time when Obama had these new rules that came out under this new dispensation or administration, okay? Like when you think of dispensing justice, all right? So essentially, Bible history is then divided up into 7 parts instead of 2. And this would, kind of like there are 7 days in a week, and we are in the 6th dispensation. So how do we know where these kind of begin and end? Well, unlike the early church, I don't think it was divided in thousands. I think they got the idea because in the book of Revelation, there's going to be a 1,000-year reign of Christ that's coming in the future. Okay, before the whole heavens and earth goes away, and then there's a new heavens, new earth. Well, basically, they said, well, there's 1,000 there, so there must be 1,000 all the way through. But I don't believe that much. But what I do believe is that there are major covenants that God made that involved the entire world. Okay, the first one was with Adam and Eve, and we call it it's been called by theologians the Age of Innocence. All right, that was when they were in the Garden of Eden and they were innocent. Then, after they broke that covenant, there was a new covenant made. And, they would wear clothes, and that involved the killing and the wool and the sheep and all that kind of stuff. And basically, they would start a sacrificial system slowly but surely. That was the Age of Conscience. Okay, they call it the Age of Conscience. And that one went on until the next covenant. After the world was destroyed by a great global flood, then there was an age of government, okay? And, in the first 2 dispensations, you have things set up for the rules of the family. Then, under Noah, there's a age of government, and they start the first government, and they're supposed to spread out and take over the world and stuff. They rebelled, of course, in the Tower of Babel. But, you had that dispensation. Then you had a dispensation of Abraham, okay, and we call that one faith, okay, and that was where God starts to separate His religion, His authority, and sovereignty from the natural secular world, because now the world was in a defiled state, so He couldn't have the secular world unified with His glory and authority and His religion. So then you have this covenant of faith with Abraham. And, they would have faith that there was a seed that was coming, okay, and that seed would be Jesus Christ. But they continue that dispensation, and the Israelites still fall into sin, and they end up slaves in the land of Egypt, okay? So as they ended up slaves in the land of Egypt, then Moses was like, hey, let my people go, okay? We know that story, the Exodus. And then they start up a new covenant and new dispensation, which we would say is the old one, okay, because we're looking back at it. And it was the time of the law, okay, and the law that would govern the people. And the thing that was kind of neat is the Jews would use this law regardless of whether or not they were a sovereign nation, all right? And what was cool about that is that dealing with other nations and stuff, they were always self-governed, and they were free because they lived by rules that were more holy than the other people. So since they lived by a more moral authority, they never had to worry about the secular authority. So then we go through that covenant, and then John the Baptist comes initiating, okay, starting the initiation of the new covenant with baptism. and Jesus was then baptized. He was initiating the new covenant, and that new covenant is where he is buried and raises again in baptism. Okay, so when he immersed, he said, I'm going down in the water, meaning I'm going to die, and I'm going to raise again. And what does he do in the gospel? He dies and he rose again the third day on the cross. So that was him fulfilling his oath, and that is the new covenant. Now, basically, to understand the new covenant, and this will get kind of more technical, okay, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically the Apostle Paul was given the mystery to help understand what that resurrection meant, to understand the cross and the resurrection and how all this kind of fulfills a prophecy, and how we are to live no longer under law, but under grace. And so it's called the age of grace. Now these are all parts of actually, though, of Jesus' new covenant. It's a stage, okay? So basically, we continue that, and that is the current dispensation that we're under. And then the next one is where all of the promises of Bible prophecy that, have not been fulfilled literally yet are going to be fulfilled in the next dispensation. That is the return of Christ. And when Christ returns and he does justice with the Antichrist system, this whole system that has tried to replace Jesus Christ on this earth, once he does away with that, then he will have a time of reign on this earth, and we will receive all of the physical promises. As Gentiles, now we have the spiritual promises. I know that gets a little kind of more technical than this episode, but basically we receive the spiritual promises now, then we will add on the physical promises, and heaven will come to the earth. So when we understand that's how it goes, and basically we understand the Bible going from start to finish and developing itself progressively, then we're able to get a proper eye, a proper fix on things. And then we can focus on the questions of theology. Who is God? What is salvation? What is the law? We just have to understand that context first before we go on to other things. And so, now we're going to go ahead and we will step into next episode and kind of develop that out a little bit more. What is the New Testament religion? And so hopefully, as you go through this, you too can find the way.